One of the things that surprised me about Toys R Us's comeback announcement was how they were going to be meeting with toy manufacturers themselves at the New York Toy Fair. I was expecting that Toys R Us would end up using a licensing model, where they let entrepreneurs pay them to use the Toys R Us name when they open a toy store. It would mean less risk and less investment for the creditors who now own the Toys R Us brand name and such, but in retrospect I should have realized that that wouldn't work. A lack of e-commerce is one of the major reasons why the old Toys R Us went down, and that licensing model that I was talking about doesn't actually get them a website where parents can buy toys. So that model won't really work. High's Nobiety revealed that new locations are going to be 10,000 square feet instead of 40,000. Personally, I think that's a bad idea. One of the things that made Toys R Us great for most of its lifetime was the sheer selection. I mean, when you look at a few of the commercials from the years when Toys R Us was an up-and-coming brand, you'll see that one of the main things Toys R Us boasted was a huge selection. Selection means having lots of different kinds of toys in the store, and that's going to require a lot of floor space. Also, if Toys R Us is going to be having activities or spaces where kids are allowed to play with toys, that's going to take space too. This is something that worried me when I was thinking about what form Toys R Us would be coming back in. If I were an investor, I'd probably want to start small. And if starting small means starting in few locations, that might not be such a bad thing, unless you're a customer who wants to shop at Toys R Us and you happen to be far away from any Toys R Us location. But if starting small means small floor space per store, then that means less space for selection of toys, less space to experiment, less space for play, less space for activities. Granted, a large selection on your website could make up for skimpy selections in store to an extent. In fact, if almost the only way you sell toys is online and the stores are basically just advertising or showrooms with computers where you can order things online, that might work, but it wouldn't have much nostalgia value. Honestly, I think it would be much better to invest in larger stores. There'd be more flexibility with what the store managers would be able to do with those stores, the kinds of toys they could stock, and the kinds of activities and play areas that they could have. Actually, there was another location that has never been a Toys R Us, but that I was hoping the people in New Jersey would consider. There are two malls in the Grand Rapids area. One of them, way over on the east side, was Woodland Mall. It is very close to the old Toys R Us location that I was talking about, the Toys R Us location that I went to. You can tell it's pretty sizable, got a lot of stuff near it. It's got Celebration Cinema on the border. It's got, I believe that's Red Robin. Tons of stuff. I went over all of that in my last video. But the equivalent store over, the equivalent mall over on the west side is Rivertown Crossings Mall. And this mall is very close to several important smaller cities and suburbs in the Grand Rapids area. There's Wyoming, there's Granville, there's Jenison, there's Hudsonville. All of those come to this mall. And this mall recently had one of its big heavy hitter retailers go out of business. That would be the Yonkers location. This one right here. And it has been vacant for a few months now, and I am sure that the mall would love to have a Toys R Us take up this vacant spot. Not to mention, the communities near this mall have never had a Toys R Us amongst them. They've had to drive either all the way over to the east side of Grand Rapids to the location on 28th Street, or they've had to drive all the way up to the location on Alpine. Or even they had to drive all the way to Holland on the coast of the lake. There used to be a Toys R Us in Holland back in the 90s. So these communities have never had a close-by Toys R Us. They would love to have a Toys R Us that is much closer and has a much shorter drive to go get presents at Christmas time. It'd be very convenient for all the families living in all those areas, and there are tons of families living in these areas. Families will be coming to this area of Grandville in any case. Much like the Alpine and 28th Street locations, there are so many different reasons to come to this area. I mean, there's an Olive Garden here, there's multiple different steakhouses, there's Red Robin, there's a Red Lobster, it's Applebee's, they got an IHOP, there's the food court at the mall, there's a theater right inside the mall. This area here, it's not parking lot. I mean, it's got a parking lot beneath it, but these are theaters. Just like every other location I've recommended so far, there's also a Best Buy pretty nearby, but there isn't a Chuck E. Cheese at this point. That being said, almost everything that the Alpine and 28th Street locations have, this one also has. Another thing that this location has going for it is that, like the Alpine location, it is not at all far from an exit off of the freeway. It's about a mile to the west, this exit. So again, people can come from further and wider to visit the Toys R Us if it took up this Yonkers location. I didn't go to Yonkers all that much while it was open. Pretty much I just went there once during their liquidation sales to buy one of those Last You for Life KitchenAid mixers on the cheap for a friend's wedding present. But I can tell you a few things that this location can offer that will be unique and that will have potential wow value for your customers if you make use of them to create wow value. I mean, obviously it's got this docking bay that trucks can load merchandise into, so if there's a new shipment of stuff, everybody's going to see it. But enough about that. Let me tell you some things that you would not be able to tell just by looking at this satellite image. First off, it's 2 stories. That means the floor space, which is already probably half again larger than the former Toys R Us locations on Alpine or 28th Street, it's actually going to be about double what this map implies. More floor space means more areas that can show demos, more toys and types of toys that this location can stock, more things to explore, more space for play and activities. Secondly, inside here, there's a glass elevator and there are 2 escalators right within this store. Those could have a lot of potential for wowing customers. If you can create an excellent view of one floor as the elevator or escalator's riders approach it, then you can impress the customers and or make them gravitate to a particular area if they see something that they like. Third, there's a lot of glass windows on the outside of this Yonkers location. That means people who are outside can look in and see what's going on inside. That's got a lot of potential. There's like these 3 entrances that go to the outside, as well as an entrance that attaches to the mall here, both on the top floor and on the bottom. And it's right across the way from Build-A-Bear Workshop. So yeah, in some ways you'd be competing with them, but you could also share ideas with them. Anyhow, fourth thing is that there's a balcony above one of the main exits right about here, right behind all of this glass. This could be a good place for a play area, or for a demo space, or simply for displays that would catch the eye when customers look at them from the outdoors. And fifth, this is something that I actually talked with some employees at the mall about. This mall is probably going to be flexible about your options with this space. I mean, they lost a huge retailer when they lost Yonkers, and Toys R Us would be in high demand. So if you're thinking that you'd rather rent 1 floor of all of this instead of 2, the Rivertown Crossings Mall can probably make that happen. It wouldn't be the first time. There was an Old Navy location. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, right here. This Old Navy location used to take up 2 floors. It used to have an escalator and elevator, right inside it, just like the Yonkers location does today. But Old Navy decided that they wanted to go down to 1 floor, and the mall took out the elevator, took out the escalators, divided up the 2nd floor space into places for other retailers, and now Old Navy is just on the ground floor. They could probably do the same here, if you only wanted to open up a Toys R Us on one of these floors instead of two. There are a few other things to think about with this space. First of all, when Toys R Us closed in the Grand Rapids area, Grand Rapids didn't just lose the Toys R Us. They also lost a Babies R Us location at the 28th Street, and at Alpine location there was also a Kids R Us. So we lost both Kids R Us, Toys R Us, and Babies R Us. It might be tempting to open up a Kids R Us at this location, especially since there's so much floor space. I would hesitate to do that because that Kids R Us is going to be competing with other heavy hitters at the mall, like Macy's, JCPenney, and Kohl's. I mean, if you can beat those stores on prices, you're going to get their traffic for children's clothes, but if not, you get the idea. A Babies R Us, by contrast, would be an excellent idea. Don't forget how many suburbs are nearby. I mean, look at all of this fuzzy stuff that's on the map. All of that is residential areas. And they come here. So Babies R Us would probably fit in perfectly. Of course, some other things to keep in mind are nearby competitors. At the old 28th Street location, Walmart, Target, and Meijer were far, far away. Here, there's a Walmart. It is probably about a mile west of the mall. And there's a Meijer that is just right across the street from the mall. Target is not far either. For context, Meijer is like a cross between Walmart and Target, with maybe a little bit more emphasis on groceries. So they'd be a target for, no pun intended, they would be a target for toy shoppers as well, and they'd be your competition. So that would have to be something you'd keep in mind. All that being said, realistically, if Toys R Us is to make a comeback and rise to its former glory as a major household name and source of fun, you're going to need to impress your customers. Not just loyal ones who are nostalgic for the comeback, but ones who were turned off in the mid-2000s when the old Toys R Us began importing cheap, crappy toys and trying to sell them alongside the quality stuff that heavy hitters like Hasbro and Mattel were providing. And of course, you're going to need to impress new customers. Small floor space might be easier to start with, but it won't be as impressive as a large store. So please consider making at least some of the stores that you open large, even if it's not ones in the Grand Rapids area. It's just not going to be the same without them.